We've got some Montreal Canadiens prospect discourse to dive into on today's show. Because when it comes to a guy that many of us thought was going to be a Montreal Canadien as quickly as this season, Michael Hage is a guy that has been making the rounds as one of the hottest and most hyped up Habs prospects today. Now, we had ourselves a clip that was making the rounds on social media of what Eric Engels and Tony Marinaro said on the Sick podcast with Tony Marinaro yesterday that speaks about Michael Hage and what the future may actually hold for this guy. Turns out, there's a lot more than meets the eye that you can talk about. I'll leave a link in the description firstly to this video clip, and then to this article posted on donlescoulisses.com by Felix Forget that asks whether or not Michael Hage is not mentally ready to play for the Montreal Canadiens. This clip reads on the caption, "Although it is unlikely, there is still a very realistic scenario in which Michael Hage is a Montreal Canadien at the start of this upcoming year." Now, this is pretty interesting, because just reading this text, you'd have a lot of Canadiens fans that say, hey, wait a minute, what? Michael Hage can become a Canadian at the start of the upcoming year? Realistic scenario? What are you talking about? I thought it was already confirmed he's going back to the Wolverines. And that, I guess, has not necessarily been maybe set in stone, I guess, but still, all signs and all indications have pointed to Michael Hage still exercising his NCAA eligibility and refusing to sign with the Habs as soon as many of us hoped he would. There was already a big idea floating around that at the end of the Michigan Wolverines season, wherein Hage had 52 points in 39 games played, this guy had a top 6 spot in Montreal with his name on it. All he had to do was sign and come over to the team, and he would have probably helped the Canadiens out in their Stanley Cup playoff run as they made the third round and inevitably lost to Carolina. Don't get me wrong, this center core got the team there. But look at the center core, man. Suzuki, Evans, Deneau, Kapanen, I'm sorry, even if the Montreal Canadiens made the Stanley Cup Finals, I don't know if anybody is looking at this center core and saying, yep, that's a Stanley Cup winning center core there, people. I understand they made the third round, and they did have 2 glorious rounds against Tampa and Buffalo, but when Jake Evans is your second-line center, it still indicates that there are roster improvements that can be made. And I'm not necessarily saying that Michael Hage could have dethroned a Jake Evans and definitively have been better right off the bat, but everything that we have learned, it seemed like the Montreal Canadiens wanted to try, and they had that spot reserved for Hage. So when Hage decided, hey, I want to go back to Michigan, I want to play a third year with the Wolverines, yada, 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 unfinished business, etc., that was seen as a disappointment. And a lot of Canadiens fans were saying, well, maybe they should have gone out there and gotten Robert Thomas or something. If they thought Michael Hage was coming over, then okay, great. But he didn't at the end of the day. With that said, let's go out there and take a look at what Eric Engels talks about in this Sick podcast clip, courtesy of this article posted on donlescoulisses.com. The case of Michael Hage has been attracting attention for the past few weeks. The Canadiens prospect has decided to return to the NCAA next year, but it's increasingly clear that this decision isn't necessarily set in stone. Jeff Gorton mentioned it could still change, and Hage at the club's development camp also agreed, although he specified that he expects to return to the NCAA. All of this is interesting considering that many people expected Hage to make the jump to the NHL at the end of last season. A late season injury changed things, but it feels the kid is ready to play with the Canadiens. But Eric Engels, appearing on the Sick podcast, offered another hypothesis, which has nothing to do with the young man's physical development. Perhaps Michael Hage isn't mentally ready to play for the Montreal Canadiens, Engels said. And if you watch the clip, Engels says that there is a lot of value in doing what Michael Hage is projected to doing. Going to college and spending a third year is very important, and for the most part, I think we could all agree that college education is a better long-term thing that you can acquire rather than 1 or 2 extra years at the beginning of your NHL playing career. Hockey doesn't last forever. The stuff in your brain, that tends to last a lot longer. Michael Hage going back to Michigan is a noble decision, but it also is one where you can question whether or not Michael Hage really has it in him to be a Canadian at this point in time. Engels says that he feels that Michael Hage is ready, physically, skill-wise, conditioning-wise, to be a Montreal Canadien and to have an impact in the National Hockey League. But if he internally is thinking, hey, I'd rather go back to Michigan, I have unfinished business, I want to win a national championship, I want to be there for my teammates, I want to do this, I want to do that, then maybe, his head just isn't where it needs to be a Montreal Canadien. And that's a very kind of duplicitous way to talk about it. I think there are multiple ways you can respond to that claim. Like, of course he's not ready to be a Canadian. That's why he's going back to school. But Engels' main point is that if Michael Hage is focusing on all this other stuff, maybe that's fine. It's okay for him to put the NCAA priority in his brain and strictly say that he wants to go there. The article then says, we know that playing in Montreal, especially given that he is a highly anticipated prospect and the club is ready to turn the corner on its rebuild, comes with a ton of pressure. And if Hage feels capable of playing in the NHL, despite that, maybe he wants to make sure he's better equipped to handle the Montreal market. It can be part of the equation even if it is talked about less. It's possible, in reality, that the reason is something else entirely. Perhaps Hage simply prefers to spend a little more time in the NCAA to play with his brother and with a top team at Michigan, or he believes that the best place for him to develop is still the college scene. But the mental aspect of it, as discussed by Engels, is an interesting theory, and if Hage and the Canadiens agree with it, all the better. Now, with that said, Montreal is still on the hunt for a top 6 center. If Michael Hage is not going to come over and be that guy, I just kind of wonder where it is Kent Hughes decides to shift his focus towards. Obviously, Jake Evans is a fine player, but a second-line center on a cup-winning team? Sorry, he's not really that. Michael Hage could potentially be that, but we're going to have to wait a little bit longer, it seems, to really figure out if that's going to work. Hage and Demidov sounds like the dream team. Add on an Alexander Jarofsky. There's a lot to like out of the future of the Montreal Canadiens. Speaking about that Jarofsky, we've got to make an entire other video talking about the trade update with him and his future in the National Hockey League. So I'm going to peace out right here. Let's go out there and talk about Jarofsky in a separate commentary, just so we can have some diversification of the prospects in separate videos on the YouTube channel. You can let me know your thoughts in the comment section. How do you feel about Michael Hage and the idea that maybe he just isn't ready to play in the National Hockey League mentally? And if there is a chance for him to change his mind over the next little while, there may actually be a realistic scenario in which Hage starts the season with the Canadiens rather than with the Wolverines. What do you think are the likelihood chances that that actually occurs? Do you think it's going to go down? Let me know in the comments all your opinions. Michael Hage, yay or nay, Michigan, Montreal, let me know in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.